Welcome to Bank On It, Conversations with First Seacoast Bank. Today's topic, the role of community banks in contemporary times. I'm your host, Chris Islov, and here with me today is Jim Brannen, Chief Executive Officer of First Seacoast Bank, who will also give insights into what a day in the life of a bank CEO looks like. Today's episode is part 2 of our 2-part series. Just going to keep going on that community theme for a second. How has First Seacoast Bank worked to make itself a key player in driving positive change within the community it exists in?
Part of it, let's talk about banking for a minute, and then we'll talk about our charitable efforts. But part of it is size. You know, we're slowly building, gradually, steadily building critical mass over time. Your amount of capital, how big you are, you know, what's your legal lending limit, things like that, to be able to help our local businesses grow and expand. And that's a lot of what we do. Our bread and butter for our business lending, our owner occupied businesses and business real estate is, you know, it's what we do and what we do well. And that, you know, I look at businesses that we started with, were very small when I got there, and look at the size of them now. And of course, we all see it. Look at the cranes down at Pease or up in Rochester or in Dover, building and expanding at industrial parks and business parks and things like that. So it's going very well in that regard. So size matters, and we've always been conscious of the fact that we're stewards, right? It's not my money I'm lending, it's your money as a depositor, right? And that doesn't matter what kind of bank you are, you're in a stewardship role, and we take that seriously. And so that's helped us as well, as we've been able to maintain through the 08-09 crisis and the current financial turmoil, I'll call it, or challenges. We've been able to maintain the strength and of the bank going forward. We also, back in 19, formed a formal First Seacoast Bank Community Foundation, which we hadn't had before. Now, we've always been big in charitable giving, but we hadn't had a formal foundation and a small foundation board to drive that. So I think you know, supporting communities through charitable works, donations is a big part of what we do. And that's one of the downsides, I think, to consolidation. I think there's so much pressure on banks to force them to consolidate: regulatory pressure, financial pressure, credit pressure, things like that. Talk about the differences between big and small banks. Our business model is fundamentally different than a very large bank, and our delivery systems are the same. So they have to drive certain efficiencies that we may not have to or don't. So they'll curtail hours. You talk about accessibility, that's one thing. But at the same time, as regional or larger banks acquire or merge with smaller banks, the level of giving is not the same as it was when there was, you know, a small independent bank here, and I think that's kind of too bad. But I think that's the nature of the beast. So as communities see a reduction, as we see nationwide in small community Main Street banks, I think that's kind of a unintended consequence of the consolidation.
I'm going to keep going on that community theme for a second. So you started at First Seacoast Bank in 2007.
Yeah.
How has the Seacoast community changed? And if you could, I mean, you can talk about that broadly, but also through the lens of the charitable giving that the bank does. I know that, like, I'm going to go into the arts sector for a second. I've seen you at shows at the music hall, bopping your head in your seat. You seem to have adopted that pretty well. And I think by and large, the arts community, from my perspective, has grown substantially in the last 20 years here in the Seacoast. But also, I know that you guys get involved with charitable giving to, you know, like different parts of, you know, the accessible healthcare industry,
right,
things of that nature. So can you talk about how that landscape has changed, I guess, in the last 20 years, and I'll stop and let you talk.
No, but you're right. I think back now, and you make some comments that kind of get the dust off some of my synapse, and I'm remembering some things. Goodwin Family Health has expanded, acquired charity down in Portsmouth, and expanded. The very first project that we didn't make it happen individually, but we contributed to help make that. I think we purchased some CDFA tax credits for that helped, and as we did for the Children's Museum. I don't know if you remember, they moved to Dover from Portsmouth. And look at places like Lanza, the expansion down at Pease, and what's happened down there. I think of other charitable contributions. Coast Bus is one that we've helped supported over the years in a big way. That's an essential service to our community. So I would say that if you look at the Seacoast with respect to the arts, healthcare, transportation, we've got some things going that most communities would cut off their left arm for, no pun intended. But those are the things that you see happen over time. That's pretty rewarding. I have to remind myself sometimes, we were one of the early big supporters of the Seacoast Cancer 5K for Wentworth Douglas, which is huge, and things like that. So, and certainly you look at the expansion of healthcare in our markets, it's exponential. So and certainly we need it.
Rooted in the sentiment of hindsight being 2020, let's get into Banking Time Machine. Next segment's called Banking Time Machine. What's one thing you wish you knew then that you know now?
Well, good question, Chris. Thanks. I'll have to give that a minute to think about, but probably on a personal level is, I think Tom Puccarello, who was one of my MBA professors in the MBA version of organizational development, said, don't give bad issues or bad people a parking spot in your head. And I think if I could have learned that and adapted to that, part of that's maturity, part of that's age, But I think I don't give anybody a parking spot in my head, other than the 15 voices that are screaming up there routinely. But other than that, I don't give I don't lose sleep over much these days, because at the end of the day, it's helped me recognize what's important in life. And again, you can't fix everything, and not everything's going to be the end of the world either, no matter how bad it seems up front. So patience, grasshopper.
All right, Jim, just want to clue the listeners in here on, what a day in the life looks like for you as the CEO for Seacoast Bank. What are things that are meaningful to you in your day-to-day operations?
Yeah, so I've had a good opportunity at First Seacoast to migrate to the CEO role. And Rick Donovan, our CFO and bank president, kind of takes care of day-to-day operations with the rest of the management team. I've been able to focus on strategic issues and risk management and threats to the industry and the organization. I'm active. I'm the current chair of the New Hampshire Bankers Association, our state trade association, and I'm active down in Washington, both with the American Bankers Association and the ICBA, which is the Independent Community Bankers Association, on lobbying issues and legislative and regulatory issues. And the regulatory landscape's changing very fast. I think Bob Graziano may have been on a previous episode, talked about what's going on in the regulatory compliance area. And there's a lot of changes with the current administration. And so the changes regardless of whether it's Republicans, Democrats driving this. A lot of the regulatory and banking issues are truly bipartisan. But regulators historically have can overdo things at times, and you've got to be mindful. Even if it looks favorable on its cover, you've got to dust it off. So I spent a fair amount of time on trade association issues, supporting the community banking industry, and risk management. I mean, we have functions today: cybersecurity officer, risk management officer, roles like that, and functions like that to protect the organization and our customers. And again, it gets back to that stewardship role that we didn't have 10, 15, 20 years ago. And it's the need that drives you to those things. So that, big part of it is that, and obviously technology is huge in terms of risk and opportunity. So we're trying to be as nimble as we can to get kind of state-of-the-art products and services, features and functions out in front of our customers, keep up with the Joneses, if you will, and because size doesn't matter when it comes to customer expectations. It really doesn't. So those are the types of things I'm working on. Those are the types of things I enjoy working on, but certainly risk management, strategic issues, strategic planning, and trade association issues are what occupy most of my time.
In hearing you talk about cybersecurity threats, et cetera, and you may not be the authoritative voice on this. I know Barb had a lot to say about it in a past episode, which people should definitely check out if they haven't yet. Shameless self-promotion there. But what type of research and or thoughts do you have on AI? Do you ever think about that?
Oh, sure. I think AI and cryptocurrency, or stablecoin, as some of them are calling it, are two potentially disruptive, very disruptive technologies, services, / whatever they are, that maybe whatever they are isn't the right term, that could be very disruptive to banking, At the same time, they also present a ton of opportunity.
Sure.
So let's take crypto for a minute. What are the banking services that the consumers are looking for from banks as it relates to crypto? Is it custody? Is it acquisition, purchase and sale of crypto? Is it transfer of crypto from point A to point B nationally and internationally? Or is it just custody, record keeping, lookup, that kind of thing? Or is it conversion to US dollars, right? Or currency, fiat currency? And what are the systems and the risk management around that? So it poses a lot of threats, but also a lot of opportunities. So that's one on crypto. On AI, I think the sky's the limit with respect to that. And I think there is real opportunity for Main Street banks to leverage AI in ways that add value. To me, I'm going to be at a conference tomorrow at the Grapponi Center it's a banking trustees forum put on by the New Hampshire Bankers Association, where the local deputy controller for the OCC out of Boston is going to talk about AI and cryptocurrency and those threats and opportunities going forward. Again, it will evolve into something that I don't sit here today and put my finger on it.
Sure.
But when it comes, it'll require fast adaptation by us.
Yeah.
And it will be the adoption by customers. I have a sneaking suspicion will be at the speed of light. Just getting, that's what drives it.
Right.
I'm a kind of old school. I have AI synonymous with the call tree when you call into a company and you get stuck in voice.
Oh yeah, that's not a positive experience.
It's not. But that's what I have in my head.
Yeah.
Is how many times do you have to beg the lady in the box to speak to a real human before you get a real human? Lose 20 minutes out of my life on hold or listening to her say over and over again, please restate your question. But, So, but that's not at all what it is. I think that's kind of the humorous side of it, but the opportunities through the roof. And I think it's going to be an exciting time for banking going forward. When I sit here and look back at 1984, when I started, banking is materially, substantially different than it is today. That's 42 years ago, right? 41 years ago. 41 years, we'll achieve similar transition in half that time or a quarter of that time going forward, just by the speed, the speed of technology advancing.
Jim, what are some lessons? This is another big question. I apologize. I'm lobbing a bunch of them over the table here, but what are some lessons that you've learned over the years that have really stuck with you?
Yeah, people matter, no question. I think that, I can't be positive enough or emphasize enough the value of a positive culture in your organization, because that makes everything possible. Banking is not easy. As much as I'd like to tell everybody that I take a nap every afternoon at my desk, I don't, and nobody does that at our bank or any bank really. It's a challenging industry to be in, and one, just on its face, it's challenging to manage the risks and leverage the opportunities on its face, but at the same time, banks are under such tremendous pressure that that presents other challenges, both financial and particularly regulatory. I used to joke kind of sarcastically that I was going to have T-shirts printed that said, in the advent of Dodd-Frank came out in 2009, 10. I used to say have T-shirts printed that says American Congress. Doing too much, too late to the wrong people since 1776 or something like that. I mean, that's just the way it is. But no, I've learned you can't fix everything. 2, you got to be patient. And 3, make sure you do what you can to make a good culture. And you need to be there. You need to be present. It's easier to be present in a small organization. It really is. And that's what makes it fun, for sure.
Nice. Jim, can you recommend some influential books that shaped your perspective on leadership, finance, or personal growth? And, speaking of technology, I understand that you've moved away from actually reading books and you're now an audiobook addict. I'm an audiobook addict. It's a cure for my insomnia. I keep them in my ears all night. You have to picture this: CPAP, headphones, and I've got a book playing. So that's a vision, isn't it? Yeah, it really is.
We just recorded that, right?
Sorry. That's live.
Yeah. No, I would say, it's not only books, but people. I've had a couple of college professors over the years that really made an impact on me. I also had, I think back that we had a couple of consultants at my previous bank One was a New Hampshire guy, and the gal was from Colorado. Carolyn Fisher was from Colorado, and she was a culture consultant. Mark Bechtold was from New Hampshire, and he's an amazing guy who was also an internal HR consultant. And managing the voices in my head, and I'm being a little sarcastic when I say that, to avoid the negativity over time. I think that's probably the single biggest thing that I've worked on, and the best advice I've gotten. Books that help me through that is, and the first half of this book is excellent. The second half may or may not interest me. It's called The Way of Transition, and the name's author is escaping me. Maybe we can look it up. Was excellent. The first half of that book's outstanding. And that's about managing change, which is true for banking or any industry individually. And obviously, I go back to the Peter Drucker School. That's what I came up through back then. So, who moved my cheese kind of stuff back in the day. But no, I think there was no Banking 101 book. There isn't one. And it's about people, and it's about managing change. If you can manage change effectively, and I'm not saying I'm a great change manager, but if you can manage change effectively, that's 98% of the job right there.
Jim, really appreciate your time today. Thanks for joining us on the program.
My pleasure, Chris. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for tuning into this episode of Bank on It, Conversations with First Seacoast Bank. I'd like to thank my guest, Jim Brannen, for giving us a look into his role as First Seacoast Bank's CEO and how community banks have shifted over his years serving in the financial industry. I've also enjoyed his insights on what a day in the life looks like for him as he continues his professional journey in serving the community both internally and externally at First Seacoast Bank. First Seacoast Bank is member FDIC, equal housing lender. For more information, visit www.firstseacoastbank.com.